Sangye chedan zoje janala janjo pardo dane Dage jin zoje bea zanamanje indola penjere sanje Dovara jo sangye chedan zoje janala janjo pardo dane jazoje Dage jin zoje bea zanamanje Dola penjere sanje dovara jo Sanje chedan zoje Onamala janju bardo dani jazoje Lage jin zoje beato namanje Dola benjere sanje Dovara shu Simje tanje dewa dan dewe yodan demba Simje tanje donga dan donga ye yodan jawara yuj Simje tanje donga la mebe dewa tamba tamira Simje tanje nire chadan nidan de Nyola nebara gyuru ji Simje tanje dewa Devi yudan dembara gyuji Simje tanje donga Donga ye yudan dawara gyuji Simje tanje donga Dewa damin dawara gyuji Simje tanje nire chadan Nyola nebara gyuru ji Simje tanje dewa dan devi Dembara gyuji Simje tanje donga Donga ye yudan dawa Simje tanje donga la mebe dewa damin dalawara gyuji Simje tanje nire chadan nidan de Nyola neb gyuru ji Kange tenjin dewara jonga ba meba ji Cheba meba da meba wa meba ndo meba tate temen tenji Cheba nyeji jidun zobe sanje marana Tamba de la cha de lu Nyen de shiwa zanama kunshi Nyeji tenze ganyen dan dola pembara jenama lamshi ni Jiten tundun zeba kanda yanda dembe tonan Kunde na zon de zomba nyen de chanchu zembe soch Anje jine yumtel cha de lu Dobe dawa nanza shin sabshin yaje kwa Kundo zambu wazir ta kunne chol cha ze ai lu sa shi peji chushi me Raba leji ni de jimban de sa je shindu mi de kuwa Lukun nanda shin chubara shu Etama guru rena mendalak Nirya taya mi Sanje tamjen dubi ku dajen zimbe ngo ni kunjo Sumje tawa de lama nam la cha zalu.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha,
the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become the Buddha to benefit of all sentient beings.
Until enlightenment,
I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in humility, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be abide with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in community, free of bias, attachment, and anger.
May all sentient beings with happiness and
causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in humility, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Independent origination, there is no ceasing, no arising, no annihilating, no permanence, no coming, no going, no separateness, and no sunness. I prostrate to the concentrated Buddha, the supreme among all teachers,
this peace which is free of elaboration. I prostrate to the Sublime Mother of Buddhas and of the assembly of the heroes and bodhisattvas, who through the noble basis leads heroes seeking pacification to complete peace, who through the noble path causes those benefiting migrators to achieve the aims of the world, and who through possession of the exalted subdues. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and who eternally shines forth a forever noble light. To you, Buddha, I make prostrations. His crown is spread with incense, adorned with flowers, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I
imagine a Buddha and land by
offering
bring it to you. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus meeting the teaching of the realist teachers will do to the spiritual mentor. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be careful with them spiritual rights. Welcome Guru Jananda. Okay. 야, 다 참말로라. 인공들레 수기 또 담보대. 아니, 다 뜻의 이름 무지개 제일 양결. 롭센도 수만 고쳐야지 잡아래. 다 되게 날라 단다 되게 날라 롭센도 어디 시지. 아니, 여름 무지개 참나베 다선 남베 세리 달다도 군두제 베자디 차대요래. 다 되게 나네 디 차상지 도스 조바이나 람산 차라지고 세요 말에 다 인바인산 되게 나네 다 되전도 마도스마 카드 내가 체전 민도 제 그상만 롭전다 내가 여버서도 비치네 그상만 로리 티버와
Mhm.
아 로리 된다와 여버치네 다단다디 샘샘 좀 거데 그래서 로리 갑둘라 샘 거데도 차상 로리 갑두네 레사레 이나 샘중 샘샘 좀 니나네 샘중 당갑 중 아지 당술지요레 되게 당가데 다 그래서 로리 갑둘레 레요 말에 다단데 아 디 샘샘 중데 제차바나 그래서 로리 단 델데 요다 지 남배 중리 셰베다 츠마리베 남자 아니 다 단 도도도 버디 강가되나 semjung di teba na chazang ji tena le yungu chazang di chene tu suma lobten di damba yinsi.
So good afternoon to all. So we are having class after quite a while, and for the topic, the subject, we are studying this book conceived by, as it says, conceived and introduced by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classic, Volume 2. And in this volume, we will be studying about mind and consciousness, and which is very much related with the text that we studied last time, the mind and awareness. And so many part of that book also comes in here, especially about the classifications of the mind and awareness. But what was not included, what we didn't study earlier, is the 51 mental factors, and so 51 mental factors are all in here. So therefore, this book is kind of in itself a complete sort of presentations of the Buddhist psychology or Buddhist mind, and therefore, kind of we decided to go through this book.
Imba sonza ta terin dini nga ta dunda la ta subject tu suma yewa to che me ta nga sambala tu suma kyawar mo chi sungsha yo te ji sung jin tu suma de she to rob to tum yamne do ina te pento che me to samsung kare ze na kyan de la pala inji te te indo ne inji to la sungsha yo te yewa inza te lor du de la te 돈다 고야라 도좀 내체 용거레스 삼송스 같이 그나서 다 된다라 고 첨바지는 도구 되잖아요 도순도 바이나 미리바 게임도스
Uh, so you're saying you don't have the outline of the so the courses or divisions. We will just follow the way it is presented in the book, and because he will give sort of a brief explanation of each section, and then most of you have a book, so you can read at your own the more detail about it. But if you think it is more helpful if we kind of schedule kind of section by section or topic, we would do that as well.
임바 손자 다 남비 중네 다지 징업의 내로다 나샘지 남자 니즈는 좀 예와 채용 거래 최 탐제에서도 최 탐제 나라다 그 예와도 dorduini tu ma shebaina da yingwebenil da yingwebenil da yulchen lu namja zani tu ma yewa chen gores da yulchen lu namja zani yewa chen du yulchen lu namja de la da sem jung zani semgi namja de de shibe namja de chen gores da shibe namja de chen du la loben cholang ge seman de na la diji sung yore semji raji yosa wa timana ni lur wa zini imba yo dendiji sung yore da degi da semji ngo semji raji yosa wa timana ni lur wa zini semji ngo se yondo la da ngo di kandiji se yosa do la semji raji yosa wa zini salwe rajin che re sem zeo di salwe rajin che re zini dusman deshe di ge gore rwa 다 semji raji yo salwa timana ni lubur waas 다 dendegi semji namja yong wa di nambi zhungni garichi di shegu yore yulchen lu namja zaydi garichi ni yong gu yore zabayi na ngarang zon rowa sudan suyin bayi na dewan doba da dungal mi doba chikba rees semchen kandi daji yin bayi na dewan doba da dungal mi doba chikba re dungal mi doba jindu dungal yi chi to doba mi mangpo chi yong gu ware dungal pangu yorde pambi yul panya ki thap dama sona di hama ko bachini ta tanda chi dungal panya ki thap la megu yorde pambi chi di karzo orta di mahma chin teki todo tanda dungal mangpo chi tsuo nimbi dama sona di nimbi kya niyungo wades mangpo chi todo pa niyungo wade ta dewa dama sona dewa dubar dugu yorde dewa duya ki 탑을 두마 쉐바지니 레와데 동알 유르고레스 레와 두베가 규데 동알 키비 규드 유럽이 차도 용고레스 다 덴데기 대완도 봐서 동알 메도 봐 지바 임바 손자 덴데기 대와다 동알 제야기 주비 지타도 가와니 용도 제도라다 셈라 투데샤즈네 다셈 기남자 쉐야데 디니 용고레스 레와다 데두 기타 젤레다 모소나 셈기 젤레들라다 대와다 동안이 연구해 봐서 거기 리도 니긴 중자 중의 지 계산도 마서나 자와다보디 셈 고랑이 되는 연구를 했어. 셈기 제당하네.
In Buddhism, when all phenomena or things are categorized, it can be categorized into two kind of section. The first would be the reality of the basis, the reality of the basis, and the second is the aspect or reality of the subjective mind. So subjective mind and objective things out there broadly categorized into these two. And under the second one, subjective mind, then it talks about, all about mind, consciousness, or awareness. And in the Sutra of Epistemology or Epistemological Sutra by Dignac, he mentioned that, I think this is in the book, about the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity. So I'll try to use, now the vocabulary according to what is said in this book. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity, and the stains are adventitious. All the stains are adventitious. So therefore, the nature of the mind is explained or described or defined as a luminous clarity, and the all stains or afflictions are temporary. And so the reason why in Buddhism we need to explain in such a detail about mind consciousness is the very fact that all sentient beings, all of us, are common in wanting, as we always say, wanting, desiring happiness, and not wanting suffering. However, despite of not wanting a suffering, we don't know how to avoid them. We are ignorant about the process. And although we are making lots of effort to ourselves free from suffering, yet not knowing it, we are engaging sort of in the very courses of creating more suffering for ourselves. And on the other hand, although we desire happiness, but again, not knowing the ways to achieve happiness, the method, instead of wanting happiness and trying to create the cause, the seed of the happiness, we are creating more kind of a problem. So, therefore, the very basis or the very source or the very origin of all of our kind of feelings, especially suffering and happiness, is the mind itself. So the mind is the one that originates, or mind is the one that kind of is the basis foundation of all of the root of all kind of all, this um, feeling or experience of happiness and suffering. So therefore, this whole explanation about the nature of the mind or consciousness.
다 다가나신 게 에, 가린 거 중 가린다. 셰바니 사와일라 사와니 사올라 마겨 되즈니 요래 tsemi 중지래 다 tsama kun두이나 가리나 사부테마 송로 다 셰바니 사와일라 사와니 사올라 마겨 되즈 셰바 셈자데 고 살레 레진 진지래 이유 단도가 날라 단단 디날라 송샤베데 디바지야 메자지 겨와 분숨 소버체스 랑게 셈네 용송도 디니 상게 템바 인스 다 상기 좀 된데 라니기 토마스니나 토마스는 미도 다 셈니나 비자 송용도라 셈용 모데 간디지레즈나 디바지야 메자지 겨와 분숨 소버체 랑게 셈네 용송도 디니 상게 템바 인스네 대고는 데세 겨남바레스 다 대고네 디바지야 메자지 겨와 분숨 소버체 대고는 데세 생긴 데세 간디지 경고래 잡아이나 다 당이 공도 집안에진 샘자대 아주 리두기 다 유다마스나 고 희야기 대화다 동할 때도 간 중요하게 자와도 샘라 두여 봐인자 샘자대 에네 자위기 샘 코랑게 ngo저라 ngo 아니 레징이 팀에 라진라 팀에 레바 마주바 팀마 메데바 팀에 다데바 임발라 칠 칼로르 매바 레진 기타 레질라 팀레바 매바인 매바지레스 임반자 다 살와즈 샤바니 사와일라즈 자테인 거래 생게 레지 어 살와즈야 되나 코니 돈다 지바레 셈니 셈제가 되고 코랑기 ngola 팀에게 레바 주요 말디 치긴 더 자다 녀몰라 서바 다 컨트롤라서 베 대족에 레네 고 마살와 지바레스 이마선자 ngaran zoge ta nyomo be cho de zo kanga ma pa ne do ba ina rewa do cha da khondo la so bala nyembu te ne me ba zo ba ina di ba je mi je jing se ga te re yong go re ta nyomo do so ba te zo ene nyembu te ne ko me ba chin do ba ina ene sem je re jing de sal do do yo re se bo sal zne ko ngo sal cha yong go re se 다 겨와 분숨 소버지야자데 다뭐 생기 뭐 살도 두게 받디 숨겨래 다 랑기 셈네 요손도스 다셈 마루바 뇨모 마루바자데 셈 코랑기 라이징 마루바레베즈네데 마레 셈 라이징 라 뇨모벨 요레베즈네데 요 마레 셈 라이징 라 뇨모 베주 요 마레 셈 용오 마루바레베즈네데 마레 임바이나 치기 뇨모바 대조 대조게 레니 뇨모베 ngor 통기 어레스 뇨모바 젠지도 통기 어레스 뇨모베 딥데바지 통기 어레스 대기 셈jer 뇨모바데 치기 뇨모바데 마 살바이나 아니 상예잖아 데레스 상예하게 탑 셈je라지 어살레 ngo 하고서나 다 상예하게 예자데 데레스 상예자데 라질라 티멜리바 마주바데 하고와이나 네 칼로른 디니 상기 템바 인제데 이거래 상예제도 상기도라 뇨모 도소부터 셈지 렌질라 semji ngo la ta ji yön jigen ma zuna ko lebar jengin ge ni nyomo dusum de zo ma kanga pa ne pa ba ina ni semje de jo sa la cha ba de sangje zena de de es dini sangje temba yin ze de dini ji sungu yo me da
Also, in the one of the scriptures of valid cognition or epistemology, it basically says the same thing. The mind or consciousness is luminous clarity, another text. And in fact, in Buddha's own teaching, the very beginning of the teaching, that the quote that you have in the text, the commonly cited one, to not commit any evil, practice to not commit any evil, practice supreme virtue, thoroughly tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Um, and you know this can be explained. This can be explained through the nature of the mind, or the nature of the mind is explained in this verse as well. And as we said earlier, the mind or consciousness is the root, is the very basis of all of our experiences, suffering as well as happiness. And yet the nature of the mind itself is, again said earlier, clarity, luminosity, and the afflictions or stains are all adventitious, temporary. And so these afflictions or sins are considered something kind of external to the mind. And these external kind of things make mind sort of, unclear, obscure. Um, and and that obscurations basically are those evils. If you create the evils, there is obscurations of your mind. And so in the practice, what we need to do is obviously, try to avoid, eliminate all kinds of afflictions by applying antidotes in this language, not committing any evil acts or non-virtuous or unwholesome act. When you do that, try to kind of not creating any evil activities. And when you are practicing supreme virtue, when you're practicing creating virtuous activity, what you're doing is you are basically in this language, you are, clarifying your mind. You are clarifying your mind. You are bringing up the nature of the luminosity of the mind. Uh, with that, as said here, tame your own mind. Taming your own mind is making sure that your mind is not tainted by temporary afflictions or temporary stains. And so ultimately, when you're able to sort of remove all these adventitious stains or afflictions or obscurations, when you're really able to bring that, bring up the nature of the mind into sort of make it manifested, clarity, luminosity, that itself is the Buddha. That's the Buddha. And you can say that's the teaching of the Buddha, that's what Buddha is. So in a sense, the Buddha is the nature of the mind that is completely free from all stains, afflictions, or negativities. And or another way of saying is that when you're able to eliminate three poisons in its all kind of, form and kind, the nature of the mind becomes clarity, luminous clarity. And that is Buddhahood.
ta na yin da chen ju na la di sun do ler jiba tam ja da dongal pa to me ba yang sem le jo wa yin no je yang da sun ba ni gi ten zele ta yang da sun ba ni gi ten zele sung sa de ka wa ni sung go re zena tan dan do gi si de ge de ba ji am ja jing je ja wala so ba tang che do je be chom na la sem do lo ni le ba de sem do wa ye de wan den o chi de zo ge ka ri sung gi do ze ba na ane 대화도 동al 대화도 대도 대화도 중자 가르스네 샘지 여베 땡네데 대화도 동al세 묘화데 소화데 중구 여바데 세자위게 샘 고란지 칼로르다 마자바이나 샘 고란 마자바이나 대화도 동al세 중사긴 중이게 지다바데 요마레스 Jimeba Chadores. Jezan Zewada Dungal Zeni Jumbala, Kun Junsaki Jit, Tobati Kawani Jungore, Sem Zehinjita, Yobaina, Sem Degi Jelela, Ta Dewata Dungalji Jibuti, Yungures. Te Sanji Garesana, Tanda Simdulwani Lebati, Simdulwa Dewandens, Ta Sem Marumba de Dulwaina, Tege, Maruma Tula Tege, Dewachi Yore. Ota sem maruma de madulwa yana degi dongal chi ge ore ezni doge nala te son sha ase chunju ge son te tonda tendi jimbada.
Excuse me. Also, we find another words that's also in your text, which is quoted from Shantideva's text, translated here as engaging in the Bodhisattva states, Bodhisattva's way of life. In this way, all fear and immeasurable suffering arises from the mind. So taught the speaker of truth. Basically, Buddha said that, when say so taught the speaker of truth, where, and basically that kind of taught it refers to earlier than 2 verses, the one that we read from the Dhammapada Sutra, do not commit any evil, practice supreme virtue, thoroughly tame your own mind. This is teaching of the Buddha. And it's also mentioned in the collection of aphorism, just after that verse. Taming the mind is excellent. A tame mind leads to bliss. And because there is a mind, then because there is a mind, or because of the existence of the mind, then we can have an experience of suffering, happiness. All of those arises because of the existence of the mind. And if there is no mind, there's no thing such as happiness, suffering, any kind of experiences. So therefore, mind serves as the basis, as well as we talked earlier, the origin of the seed, and the mind's kind of function, therefore, is to kind of express mind itself into the resultant kind of forms of happiness as well as suffering, all kinds of this experiences. It's basically is expressions of the mind, and so therefore Buddha said, this collection of aphorism, taming the mind is excellent. A tamed mind leads to bliss. The taming the mind is excellent. The tamed mind leads to bliss. Basically means, if your mind is tamed, then that will lead to happiness. On the other hand, untamed mind leads to suffering.
Imba sonzang ta zawe ge sem zewa jin jo gu du ta chi yul ji yoba na yul de jalje gi sheba da shebe gi namja ji ja shebe gi namja de zade sheba se khorang gi ngo da bade ta sem la jane te tende gi sheba de kande ji ja go re gu yo re ze sung de ta kyang no mo chi gi dinala ta keju ji sung du keju ji la sem ze gi ko keju ji dan lemba ji jele ko gi ngo ma so na ko jele de dan di dinji yo re khorang keju ji dan lemba ji ja gi do te gari ja gi do ze bai na thome gi chu su du ba dang se ta zawe gi nangbe gi jung ne chu gang da gang yin bai na toji thome ze ne yawa ni le chi yo re toji thome ze do na ma ju gi reya yo ba de me ba se ma kalor ta ombo shi ba la ma reya yo me ni go ne ta toji thome ze yo de ja go re se ima yin za de ni gi na ne shibe namja de gang yin ba de ka re ze na toji thome ni ne thome gi na ba jin de se ko toya da reya de ni ke go ji yo ma re se thore gi ta ki toya da re gi chani ko gi ngo de kalor ta sortu ma re she tu ma re se re ba pena mi longa jin ba na pena chala ti tanda di pumba gi zoda ba jin ba na mi longa jin ba na dos la be gi re ni ko gi yib de nga zo gi so gi nyong tu re chala gi yub ja ka ri min so gi ma zo mi gi ma ta ba yin na 소위 용도고 또 용액이 저한테 수지가 그래서나 샘되게 지고 그래서 이 말자 샘 자위기 코랑기 뭐 가래서나 근데 토야 이간라야 토야 되야 근데 개구지요 말이 그 도매래서 겨지자 지난게 율남 장라 차니기 살레 개발당 렘바당스 오다 치고보이나레 낭기 코란 시바랑기 낭제도나 시베기 남자들도 시고래 치즈도 조수 두데베다 ngobokan bade zujendu dudebe ngobokan bade 시고래 딘디기다 지난게 ngobokan다 강이 바이나요 되게 거기 뭐다 마서나 남바다 마서나 때 생기 때도 차트웨기 개주되어 그래서 그래 배나 미 롱아지 디두스마 라베기 두스마 레바이나 거기 바라부리 여바다냐 잠부 여바다 진 잠주기 남바데도 강이 바데 초아 용건데 생기 때도 용구 여라 딘디기다 용투고 그래서 ene yul ribi kebartal de matans ta chigi yul de to kan bayna to to res jal to res yul jal ve kebar yores to bi kebar yores ne nyoa tam ji dani to baso su jobala nis ta nyoa tam ji dani to ta sem khorang ona 코랑 난기 남자지래 토야다래 개구지요 말이 코랑 수익용도 그래서 코랑 된도 양 코랑 잘래기 뉴바지요 그래서 셈라 셈 코랑이 된도 코랑양 코랑이 뭐다 젤레 간디지요 메데 잘토미 뉴바데 셈 코랑이 된도 요양 셰바 젠지요 그래서 된디기 개주된 배차니 그 개주지달된 거지 셈제데 된디지르샤
개주시도 당대로 시도 비드나
개주지디다 단다디 당된도 제도데
내게 인지단 세대 로초저 쉬는
그래서 근데
이거는 로초저 쉬는 삼스 또 거기도 티틸
전주가 왔다
진주 와다는데 알레 야야
주주지요 왔다
알레 온도 um so therefore basically when we talk about all kind of experiences, happiness, suffering, we must logically posit existence of the subjective mind that experiences those, experience that we have, and the one that kind of the subjective mind that experience that posits the existence of the external object, there should be such thing as a mind. With the mind, then we can know that, external things, whatever exist, and how they exist through the mind or by mind. And talking about the further kind of qualifications of the mind or qualities of the mind in the book, we find mentioned kind of 4 points. It's on page 41 if you have the book. The first thing is the consciousness or mind is the beyond nature of matter, which is characterized as a tangible and obstructive. So it is clear in nature. Another word is non-obstructive. Again, in Buddhism, when we talk about the things or phenomena, we can categorize into these two categories: obstructive and non-obstructive. And mind comes under the nature of the mind. It's a non-obstructive. Cannot be obstructed by matter. And that's the first the quality beyond the nature of the matter, or non-obstructive or free from obstructions. The second is reflections appear in a mirror. Any internal or external object, whatsoever, good or bad, pleasant or appear. The ability to appear in consciousness. So it says consciousness is luminous in that it illuminates object. So it has a capacity to eliminate all objects within itself. The object is whether it is of external object or of the mind itself, the mind's kind of knowing, experiencing, all can illuminate within the mind itself. That's another quality. And she was using an example of a blind person, touching at the singing bowl, although he can see the sensory eye consciousness and there's no perception of the image, but by touching it, that person can actually know what the sinking ball is. It's smoothness. It's kind of the shape and form, and that is experienced by the internal mind. So that image of the conscious, the sinking ball is able to kind of appear in the mind, although that person is blind, and it's done by the mind or consciousness. Um, and the third quality is uh, uh, cognition. Dinal injito sumdish kishilak shiloimbe.
안디나 신도
Dide.
율리비 개발단데 마탕스지
Ale.
숨바데
Sumbadle.
시바데 뇽아쯤이 다니도 두바스
Ale. Uh,
네.
um, maybe to do. So the how it is numbered is a little different in the English and Tibetan. In English, in Tibetan Geshe-la, there are four. The third one is cognizing its object. Its object able to cognize, able to know, and then fourth is the quality feature of the mind is merely experience. It's just a merely experience. That is the quality of the mind, and uh, and merely experience, yet merely experience not only of the external of the mind, but it also has the ability to experience within the mind itself. So it can experience, what's happening outside of the mind, as well as its experience. It has a capacity to experience its own kind of nature, nature of the mind itself.
덴데기 다 섬이 다 개주되고 그 섬이 오더보데 덴데기 개주 지단 된바지 제기여바데 남백이 다 개발하셔와 도좀 튕겨요레스 여러분이 대송도라 근데 너게 나라다 다가 내진기 너게 나라다 섬기 오다 모데 만나 제레 가리를 숨겨요레스 바이나 노나로라 샘 가져오래 자위기 샘 자데 강은 디데제는 누구 수사 여러에서는 뒤쪽 가고 싶어지요레스 그 모데 아주 저기 자식이 난도 야바이는 샘 강기 등도 여러에서는 누구야 매되니 샘 매레서는 매바자 맨되게 얘는 여대발라 디레서는 누구는 수산 뭔지사 매되니 근데 자네 뭐좀 가고 싶어지레스 도그날에 대송 요레스 에네 토야나 레야기 메디올라 당게 강라 토레 요마레 송소 토메레즈네 다 토야나 레야 메디올라 코디 갈로다 양부 롱나징이다 양부레스 가와기우나 유초조요레스 지금 니르와 되네 배는 갈메진도 코레 코드윙이레스 나도 믿어봐 샘 자리 지지기된도 콘 대기 오마레스 지지기된도 샘네 But do that the Jiji to Nego or as an attain Nego, Neto Maris, pay you do it. Then Galmezi Matsuge Shingal and Mepan into Korajabina. Mete Matsugan Tondingala, Chazang to my Gorgoji, you have been Nambaji Tongi Mato, the Barola Parzam J, they've been Nambaji Tongo Maris. What then aging is send the Katu in a you digging. Yeah, you mama, you. 딘디기다 날도 미래버 되게 남아진 다 갈로 3주니 매대버지 딘디기 개발이오레스 좋아 아니 야줄랍진도 따도 요에 미덴바당스 ям족의 발랍데 가두이 난도스마 용굴 제대거스 용굴 제대가 내진 샘대양 템포지가 요 말에 가두이나 유두그레스 공 야만 유두그레스 아니 나기 메진도 룡하기 줘봐 탐제 색발도 그렇지 봐당스 나기 메진도 롱아 접었던 저 세벌도 보지 되나 가르친 거래 저바이나 배나 나라 메주바이나 신나나라 메 주바이나 대나네 메 신메 마치바지야 라기르잖아 대 대야요 말 차장치도 알아왔어 어때 내 지금 아주 조벽에 차시 용어도 있던도 그 찹대요 그래서 그래 아니 조진도 샘비난 게 조진보진도 샘비난 걸 교와 신도 망보지 슈긴된 바 어다 다 추천보지 추천보지도 가르잖아 다 가르도 다 사당도다 용도만 되는 도시가 와라 어때 내 지금 샘되게 다지 소원 담는다 요즘에 저 강가 많이 댕겨오래서 소화대도 강가로 댕겨오래 띠 자니 다 샘ing 뭐도 보든 더 나래 댕기지 중요해서 상기게
Uh, so what was said earlier, the four kind of features or qualities of the mind is something that is accepted across all kind of by Buddhist, school of thoughts or philosophical schools. And further, it is mentioned in the sutra, kind of explaining the nature of the mind. That the first thing, it is difficult to pinpoint, what mind is. uh, it's hard to finger point what mind is. We cannot identify that this is mind within our body. It's extremely hard to kind of pinpoint the mind. And because of its nature of being unobstructive and unable to sort of contact it, it's very much like the air or wind. It always kind of sort of move sort of through everywhere. And also the another example used was it is like the I used the example of fire circle. If you burn a piece of wood with a fire, and if you make a circle, although when you are moving it, there is a spaces in between the fire, right? But because of the quickness and the way it is kind of functioning, you see fire as some kind of circle, they're moving continuously without any kind of spaces in between. And and it is also like waves of the ocean, the way it functions, uh, uh, unstable. It always moves, always changes, and it is also like the forest fire. Once there's a big kind of fire in the forest, it burns everything on its way. Likewise, the kind of the mind is pervaded across all physical, verbal, kind of activities. Everywhere it is pervaded by the mind, and um, it is also like a strong, powerful current of the river. Once that kind of river flows, it kind of, takes away whatever is on the road, rocks, trees. Likewise, when there is a strong, powerful thought, so the mind kind of blows, it kind of, brings up or shakes up all kinds of emotions, within the mind.
어때기 다 가마주 샘 가와도 자에게 발생이
So
자기 돼야
we'll take a 10 minutes break of finding our mind.
야, 다 가르쳐 버다. 샘자가 눈에 가와도 라서 라마 선세. 자자고 등등하라. 샘들 찔리 땐도
He was saying, did you find anything? You went to look for your mind. Uh, when you're drinking a tea, when you felt that taste, maybe, you think it's on your tongue.
다 가리내면 그 담보 다샘 자위게 가상 망가도 로리 갑돌라 셰베티니 셰드올라 사지 리바즈인데 셰바레스 요 사지 리바 셰베티니 즈네 가상 로리 갑돌라 가도 텐도레 다 사지 리바 제도 사지 리바즈네 단다 니가란 데셰게 고레스 살와자와데 리바자와데 니코니 타데 임바 젤레 타데 모 타데 다 살와자데게 샘코랑이 모데 셰고레스 리바 제데기 되게 샘기 젤리 가르 되게 젤리 가르치고 저한테 젤리 가르치고 그래서 다 되게 가르치는돌라 다 샘코랑이 모 살와제도 살와데 라 단다 경험을 이제 자대디가라 금전 숨당긴도 오세 가래잖아 살와데 샘코랑이 모 살와 라진 살와 ene 젤리 살와 살와제들라 코랑이 모 살와 임비찬에 살와제 자야지 거기 젤리 살와 임비찬에 젤 살와제 저다지 근데 라진 살와 임비찬에 살와제니 다 돈다 숨 살와들라 다데 가르 샤즈도라 살와제발라 토레진게 뱀비 렌질레 데베 모 살와스 다 살 샘제 코랑이 모 살와레제 모 살와 간디세 코랑이 모 살줄 가레잖아 콜라 토야다 레야기 자와지야디 요 말레스 토레기 자왈린 데비 차니 그 모데 살와레스 그봐 에네 멜랑난도 주년 차르와진 셰발랑 율장엔다 데두소 지난기 율지영 차르두루에 젤리 살와레스
지당은 열로 당기 계실라 천이 가자 시시인바 혼딩이 온디로 튕게 너는 로엔서로 당기 계실라 시지 로엔바 혼딩이 너는 로엔서로 당기 온딩이
알레
로도 딩이 너는 로션 당기 담은 게 세세션 딩 당기 아니 요 시디 트릭 인지 비유도 장대로 지대 진이던데 당기
당기 지딜로 당된 티도
아네
인지널로 당된 티샤
비유도라 근데 인지 나
당기 지디 가래잖아 샘 고랑기 지기 개주대 셰기도
아네
다 단단히 살진 리바제 고 칭이라 살지 시베 칭이라 살진 리바제 돌라 살와자 되게 된다도 다 멜롱는 주년 차려 돌라 가래잖아 멜롱는 주년 가리 나지 차려로 주년 가리 때 지바지 멜롱 고랑이 나라 차려 거로 어때 내진기 시발라 고랑이 소화돼도 가리면 소화되와 있나 대외 뭐 차라다 동알이나 동알 이 뭐거랑 시발라 차라이 여기 김정이 그 젤리 살라데스 시바되게 샘기 젤리 에네 랑이 ngol라 차조 뉴모비 팀에게 레바 마주베 라진 살라데스 다 라진 살라데도라 샘 코랑기 에 ngol라 에네 차조 뉴모라 서베기 팀에게 레요 마레 팀에게 이견다 유메베 손상 코랑기 라진 살라데스 되게 전에 다 살징자들라 김전숨 살리 돈다숨
uh the text that we studied earlier, mind in awareness. From that text, if you remember, basically the same kind of definition of the awareness. It also definition of the shebesing is actually sheba, awareness has the same kind of meaning of the mind. Clarity, according to this translation, luminous clarity and knowing. There's two parts in there, and so when we use this definition for the mind, there's a clarity part, and then there's a knowing part. So the clarity part is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity. and the knowing is the function of the mind. So it explains the nature of the mind as well as the function of the mind. And so you see kind of two different things, features of the mind, the nature of the mind as well as the clarity of the mind. Now, the clarity of the mind, when we look at that in the book, we find the clarity of the mind is further kind of sort of yeah, classified into three types of clarity, which I read earlier, but I read it I read it incorrectly for you. My apology. I said page 41. That is the explanations of the clarity. The earlier Geshe was mentioned the 4 point, if you remember, those Geshe was saying those were the four general features. And when I kind of asked him where is it in the book, and he said right below the Shantideva's quote. And I look at the English translation quickly, and what I found here is basically three types of clarity, and I thought that was, and that's why I read it, which was my mistake. Maybe excuse me. Maybe the book English and Tibetan is not the direct translation, so therefore I have made this mistake. So on page 41, you see in the first paragraph in the middle, clear quote and unquote indicates. So that's a clarity. So when we look at the clarity part of the mind, the clarity itself also indicates, and it does three kind of clarity. So the first is the Kishla read that part, so I'm going to read the part which I mistakenly read earlier. Clay also indicates the first one. Consciousness is beyond the nature of the mind, which is characterized as single and obstructive. So it is clear in nature. So the first one is uh, clear in nature or naturally clear. So first one is nature clear. If I read nature clear. Second one is uh, uh, first one is nature clear. Second is uh 당분 ngō niwa rangshin sewa
니버 제레 살바.
chile sewa sumba
숨바 란신 살바.
le chile rangshin tsikdi.
제레도 그 멜롱라 중에 다메다 처교가 나진 샘 그랑 된도 초와 대도 다메다 강가 거 누도.
So the second clear or clarity is function. It has a clarity of function, and the example uses like in a reflection in the mirror. It is it serves as a kind of clarity, just like you see the images in the mirror, and here it says luminous in that it illuminates the object, just like the mirror illuminates the object. That is the second way of clarity or clearness, I guess. And then third is the function. It also kind of clears the function, and which is the let me see what's here. The third one, essential nature of consciousness is not contaminated by stains of mental affliction such as attachment, so its nature is clear or luminous. Thus, several meanings of the word clear are stated in the text. So, what Geshe-la said was the function. Sorry, the third is not function. Third is the first and third. It could be same word. Now, obviously, we will come to that. Lots of unclarity of the word translation. So because when we use for the I don't know, I might use same word as the first one, nature aspect, but in Tibetan, in English translation, the first and the third word, in English would be same as nature. So this 당보 대 ngōda sumba di da rangshi ro. Rangshi de dingi kar yewa ro che ro jo re che. Kala inji to tsikoran de mindu di pyunal dwe gishira. ngōda rangshi de.
pyunal loga yorwa.
Yo iti.
그 ngō 살바 제레 살바 란신 살바.
che ngōda chele ngōda rangshi.
그 개발 가르자기도 되면은 ngō 살바 제도라 그랑 더 토레 메비차니 그 ngō 살바레스 샘 그런 게. 그봐. 뱀베 란신린 데비. 토야다 레알은 메비차니 그 ngō 살바레스. 다 란신 살바 제도라 차소 뉴목이 디미기 말레 비차네. 그 란신 살라레스. 뭐다 란신 자데 자위기 돈다 지래.
그래서 전지로.
뭐저 그 란신 자데 돈다 지래데. 그게 다
매배
제대 저걸 가지고 다데
독재자는 상해도 그건 매배 찬에 여.
어디기
Yes.
Hey, Tanam.
Yes.
I'm just looking up in the Tibetan dictionary, the difference between Ngowo and Rangshin is saying that in this case, the Ngowo refers to the emptiness aspect and the Rangshin refers to the luminosity aspect. Does that apply?
Geshe-la is explaining. Okay, what Geshe-la said was sort of answer to you. So he said, I asked him to clarify because of those two Tibetan words in English commonly translated as a nature. So if I use the nature, it brings more confusion. So the first one, which I explained, the nature, the nature kind of clarity. In the book, it's also translated as a nature. Nature in the sense that the very nature of the mind is free from obstruction or obstructiveness and the contact. That's the nature of the mind. And the third one also, using the same word for now, nature of the mind, that it is free from adventitious afflictions or obscurations such as attachment, anger. So what I was asking is, these two words, the differences comes from what is lacking or what is missing. And the first one, when we say nature, no obstruction, unobstructiveness and uncontactable. And in third, free from, adventitious stains or afflictions. And that's, but because in the English, it does seems like it's kept the same, although the understanding comes from the whole sentence, but the word I'm trying to find is its essential nature. Again, I find the same word in the third point, essential nature, as well as the first one, clear in nature. So there's a nature, but in Tibetan, it's different word. I hope that's helpful. If not, feel free to. 인지 돌아 직 내절라 쇼로 디코나 페주당으로 당보다 순번이가 랑신다.
대인기래. 다들 가르장 베베기 아주 책나라디 그 된다 지면은 책민다 방법 연구하되 이게 야르기 산스크리트니 초 유료인데라 야르기 책나라 책민다 여러 코니 책 소선의 여비 겸전데 전에 베베 책라디 책 로컬로가 줄고 된데 있어라.
So because the Tibetan translation comes from the original Sanskrit, so in Sanskrit, just like we find in Tibetan here, for same meaning, we find a different vocabulary that is used depending on the context, or maybe, therefore we find the two Tibetan word, same English word that is used in this book, nature. If you want to differentiate, another word that might use is aspect. But again, aspect, nature, I don't know how can you differentiate that without putting it into context or, no.
어디 무슨 다 당연히 해지 노르샷. 도 당게 셰바니 사와일라 사와니 가르사. 말에 생기라지어서 어디만에 루그르바자데 맞아. 당게 참만 참만군이 삼성로.
세마군요.
참만군이 삼성. 참만군이 리면도 노래샤.
세마도.
참만
세메 숑지라 니 숑고스 라메.
알레. 단다디 사이기 랑가샤베 노래샤.
알레.
디 어디래 용도.
또 이거 되는 이거 삼신나.
그 단다 살와제도나 다 semjerejo 랑가샤베 도나라 가르스네 semjerejo 사와제데 타용도.
랑가시부터
인지나라 얘기래.
이제는 되게 디스 쇼르 디나올 텐데 세마 디나 티샤 세마 남데 나올네 루부 추어 타베 생마라시 요서 제나는 요서 갈래 또 이게 지금 이 귤티스 텝티스 만다이나
다다 나진기 디샤 미님벤 도제진도 디샤 미님벤 도나라 가르스나 rinchen chogwe sariya pa nambra zhongla teni chawa yi is. Tijin ngeni simchen tamche kyang nyomo namgi yuring ta nan tong. 대다 긴이 로브르 녀모지 란신 장치를 탑지 최된 도ze 송샤 다 된다 더버드 가래잖아 된다 시베기 칭이 기술기 살와 살진 리바제데 살진자 되게 된다 송교로 다 살와제 가래잖아 근데 세르디서 세르 란신기 세르기 란신 코랑 뭐 세보 임비잖아 세보 레디오레스 다데 세보 임바드 가래잖아 콜라 세제 다르고니 제바지니 디치고로 라진 초기 세리바 린젠 초기 세리바 린젠 초기 세리바 넘버 존라 테니 자와지지도 셀라 자와지도라다 가레스나 세제 다르고니 니 제바지니 세보 티르무치 셀랑무진 지고로 자와지고로 어때 내진기 단 디진 녜니 사기 좀 된데 공익이 semjen tamje kyang nyumo namji yuring ta nan tong semjen tamje ki semde yang ranji wa saware de nyumo be time ki le de ba dige ne chwe tamje ni di tamje do kyuru ra ne jin ma thong wa de kare jana semjen tamje ki sem khorang nyumo be time ki le de be dige kenje ne sa gi mo to ba re se ne chwe tamje la de kyuru ra jin ma thong ba re semje re ja sa wa de ma thong ba re se 하마고 마셔버리지. 그렇죠? 임바 성장 다 semjen 탐제기 근데 렌징 요 사와 임바다 디마 탐제 루루 봐. 되게 딥돼요 봐. 때 하고에 제도 상얘기 최든배 가르도다. 좀물레배 최든야 돼 인스고. 렌징 장치 탑지 최든 도세. semje 렌징 장에 왜 사와 임바데 하고에 제도 다 누제 감다 감 바라냐 지다진다네. 주분기리 지도 손바데레스 컨디션들 지고 민도
생그랑시 요스가 주만은 로보를 계시라 랑가시베 돈는 그 장들은 베디나라
심지리 저 사와자디 랑가샤벤 도날 장도
네
랑가샤벤 돌레장 심지리 저 사와지 당세도 되는데
그는 저만 남제기 용도 장샤
지진에 저만 도다한테 니지 직직바 요인기리 네 저만 도 인삼송 알았죠
네 so
아니 원래 기타면 딜은 가도 돼서
the quote that we commonly use, right? The nature of the mind is luminous clarity. That stands advantageous. It's on page 43 in your book. And here it is. It says it's quoted from Exposition of Valid Cognition, right, from Dharmakirti, and in the Tibetan version, Geshe was saying to use another sutra. So I have to check again because in English it's easy. You have this book, right? This is book. In Tibetan we have several versions in Tibetan. So the one that Geshe was using, we looked earlier, and that was the closest. Yet it seems that it's not exactly the same. In terms of the meaning, content, yes, but we don't see the exact kind of words and so on. So that's why we are I'm asking Geshe how and what kind of the quote or so the nature of the mind is luminous clarity that stands advantageous. And I'm reading in English. So Exposition of Valid Cognition by Dharmakirti, text. And then Geshe read another quote about the mind, which is on the other page 42. The quote from the Buddha Nature Sutra, the Tathagata Garp, page 42, right? You can see the middle. Just as where the most precious gold exists, one completely purifies it. It then makes use of it. Likewise, I see all sentient beings continuously being harmed for a long time by mental afflictions. So I teach the Dharma as a means to purify the nature of what are, quote and unquote, adventitious afflictions. And so as said here, precious gold, we use it after going through the process of purification, right? So such as cutting, rubbing, scratching. Then once this all are done, you get the pure gold, we use it. Likewise, the point here is that the reason why Buddha gave teaching is to purify the nature of the mind. And because mind, just like the gold, temporarily is obscured by these afflictions, adventitious afflictions or stains. And in order, once you purify those, And beings at this moment are not able to have that knowledge or understanding of, just being obscured and needs to purify. So the reason why I am showing the teaching or giving a dharma is to purify, all these afflictions, mental afflictions or stains. And because these are, as said here, the one that harms or, that brings the suffering to the sentient beings.
Rwa.
No.
Tene daga nejingi ta dina lung mangpo chi tangi ta kangar lung dabu dabu recha.
전다가가 있는 신치 보지보다 한 거죠.
Dina yu lama chi tangi tu rwa. Yu lama tila rinjan namka chudajin tatu ranjin nyomo mes. Chi sargi ranjin la ya maju batan, namki ranjin la tin maju batan, chuyu ranjin la nyoba maju bat, jindu semgi ranjin yang la tima maju bat res. Ta semgi ranjin la tima maju bat, semgi ranjin la tima male pe yumzen kares na yu lama nala. Olan chuyu ranjin la chu kharangi tsawi ki chuyu ngola, nyoba chu yomare, le di tsoba di de yomare res. Chu khana ranjin tangwa re, salwa res, tangsal res. Namka imba ina, tsawi ki namka kharangi ngode, ngosangi namba tere mato, tela timbi ki kaabne da ngosang de meba zoisha gore mato, namka khurang tsawi ki namka ngode, ranjin ngosang res.
Yes.
Ode imba ranjin sem de yang, sem khurangi ngozane ranjin de, salwe ranjin chere, tela timbi ki ene leba juyo, khurangi ranjin le timbi leba juyo ma res.
Yes. The nature of the mind itself, as we were saying earlier, is clarity, pure, and to prove that, we have a quote on, again, same page 42, a quote from Sublime Continuum Maitreya text. It says, like the purity of a jewel, space, or water, it is always undefiled in nature. So mind, in its kind of in its natural state, it is undefiled, pure, and just like, it used an example of jewel, space, water. The water in its natural state is pure. And likewise, space in its natural state, we use kind of bluish, kind of sky, clean, but it can be tainted or obscured by temporary clouds. But in its kind of natural state, it's pure. So using this example, jewel, space, or water, the nature of the mind is, undefiled or pure or clarity.
Oderje ta yulame tanda yulamane sumbayina kaldar sem kurangi tsawegi ranjin ene ranjin ni maduba demar maduba tandamar maduba teres pena chajabaina chi nugi jiten kawajila chimbayina namki ngolan juwa yo mares jagalan tabain inbayina America inbayina re ota nubjola inbayina yakab kawaji inbayina namka kurangi ranjin kawandona namki ranjin ngosangi nambar remato ranjin la gyurdo chino la tene ranjin tuzman gyurdo ati yo mares te ranjin ki ta semjan thamje ki semse gora semjan thamje ki semde yang kurangi ranjin la gyuwa yo mares ranjin sala inbade ganga lo chibare sangi inare semjan inbayina chasangi semgi ranjin roa sa chawi ki ranjin roa sa inbade la gyuwa yo mares te sungido roa.
Yes. And the same, the text, Sublime Continuum in the Maitreya text talks about the nature of the mind is, a lack of intrinsic nature, lack of true nature. I can use in the example of sky. The nature of the sky being, clarity, undefiled, it doesn't matter whether that's, the sky is in India sky or in America sky or wherever you go. The sky, the very basic nature of the sky is same. It can be influenced temporarily by, whatever factors or conditions, but the very nature of the sky is same everywhere. Just like that, the nature of the mind is same, um, whether it is Buddha's mind or whether it's mind of the ordinary being. Same, nature, luminosity or clarity.
다가르 당게 제만 남들는 라단다 심지레저 살티
Yeah.
식도도 미다도다
Le-
심지레저 살와게 마다 심지레저 살티 단다 제만 남들이 지나라 심지레저 살티 지만니 루르 와즈니 에 식도도 미다면도 단다 코니가 지바지게 제만 남들는 라디 시리 송송도
디 강, 도드 가르도. 단 식타가란데. 생구랑 지어서 저는 로
데 유라마
귤라만 날로인데.
당게 심지레저 살자데
되게
알레데 랑가샤베도
랑가시 발라.
랑가샤베도 나라칼레 심지레저 살와제 와게 자도아
알레.
다 제만 남들는 라 심지레저 살티스 와다 되기 개버마도 미도
아니. This verse, which we have on page 43, the nature of the mind is luminous clarity that stands at advantages. We have this quote in here from Exposition of Valid Cognition by Dharmakirti. And the Geshe-la read earlier, very much, I mean, it's the same, but the only difference is particle. We won't go into the details of why one has this particle and another, but the other one, Geshe was quoting from the sutra called Langar Avatar. Many of you have, heard this sutra. So that sutra has the same, quote about the mind. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity that stands advantageous.
다 제만 남들는 라 심지레저 살티제 데자르고 가르잖아 데데 데숨 라제 데제로 그 가르잖아 시 라마 지젠 댕규 버데 되게 댕규 어레스 시 라마 가리 댕규 어레잖아 되게 고 내야데 디만은 루르 봐 셈나 디만이 카가레 디마 코란 루르 바레 마도 심지레지를 디미 주요 말에 디마 코란 카가레즈니 딘들세데 데데게 만두스마 댕규 있어
인지날 하고 오면도
알레
So Geshe was explaining the differences, in the the same quote from the Exposition of Valid Cognition. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity. The stains are advantageous. And the difference from the other, in Tibetan, use the word te, which is a particle, basically. That particle is used to show the continuation. There is something after this, So, but I don't see this in the English translation. So the nature of the mind is luminous clarity. And the te in English usually is a conjunctive particle. So moreover, so that's the difference between Exposition of Valid Cognition quote and the Langa Avatar quote, although in English would be exactly same.
다 랑가르 샤벤 도게 셈게르저 살와 지도라 셈 코랑기 라진라 데세갸바마도 되게 다 디메 콜란데 세 배고 뭐 셈 코랑지 라진 어사와레 제
디젤 저만한 로고로 돼요.
디만 엘고로데 단다 디나라 미도 지단 식데 용용 거라
네.
다 단다 셈게르저 사와 제와데게 셈 코랑기 라진 어사와레 제지모도 땡고 뭐레스
So
셈게르저 살티 제와데게 셈 코랑기 라진 어사와 레데 텔라 디메기 레바주데레 디만 루르와레즈니 디메기 모지 다 데체 잡고데 땡 코기 땡와 데데
So in Langa Avatar Sutra, the nature of the mind is luminous clarity that stands at advantages. He's talking about the Tibetan version. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity, and the stanza advantages. English would be same. In the Tibetan sense is that in Langa Avatar Sutra, it is just making sort of this, statement or explanation that the nature of the mind is clarity, and then it's not going to sort of emphasize on what is then, happening after that. But in the Exposition of Valid Cognition, when you use the Tibetan, conjunction te, it kind of tells that there's something more information about that. The nature of the mind is, luminous clarity, and or still or additionally, the states that stains are advantageous. So that's kind of would be differences from the point of view of Tibetan version. No.
Hodini jinsare, tatini tiwatilen, tiwa yona dinima, tos di chishana.
Yes. So, any questions? Because
I'm trying to find the quotes that you're talking about on page 43, and it seems like you keep saying Dharmakirti. Is that Dignaga instead?
Dharmakirti Choga Tagba.
And Chukitapa is Dharmakirti, right? So
Yeah.
Dignaga is Cholang?
Cholang, yes.
Cholang.
Okay, I'm not finding the Dharmakirti quotes you're talking about. I only see Dignaga.
Yeah, in English it says Dharmakirti.
Did I buy
Do
the
you have a
right
book?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
We are looking at the same book?
Page 43, that's what I'm worried about.
Okay.
You said page
We
43?
all have a Dharmakirti.
Huh.
Yeah, and the footnote quotes Dharmakirti, the section and page.
Okay.
Change it. I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe there's a difference between the Kindle version and the printed book version.
네, 디단다 디코랑게 단다 셈거는 주면 아주 대로에 쳐가 타고라. 조랑게 디 숭이 숭나 요래.
Cholang sunala yoy sare, ngeti tangido, semandona tiri yoy.
Geshe was saying Valid Cognition Sutra by Dignac must have the same code by Dignac. So it could be right what you have.
Semandona dumidungi sanyi zalni, jimatila zalni kewa.
He will look into and try to find it and let you know.
Dignaga is at Semakuntu, right?
Semakundi,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, and then
Semando.
Medo, okay.
Dharmakirti for an exposition on Ignatis.
Savigi Seman Namde Jiro, Seman Namde, the Seman Dogun Devari.
Yeah.
Benza could Seman Duna Yona, the Seman Namda Nayon Chori.
So Dignas is Tema Do. Tema means, valid cognition, Do Sutra of valid cognition. And Sutra of valid cognition is then later explained, and commentary is this Dharmakirti. So therefore, what is in the Dharmakirti quoted usually would be in Dignas, in the Sutra.
I have a question. So the words that are used to describe mind, clear, luminous, it seems like these are being words that are being borrowed from the eye consciousness, seeing clearly, something being luminous. My first question is this really just metaphorical? Consciousness really isn't related to, like eye consciousness would be a small subset of consciousness, but we're using these words because we don't have better words. We don't have words that directly consciousness. So that's my first question, is that case?
Tandas dina semgorang shi yue sewa da la shiurwa, yue sewa da ane tandas sikshinba da gyat pecho ni Koran la shin diye tsidi namgyu da migi wangshi ge chile ne yargyo ro shiurwa da migi namgyu migi tonga da migi sewa la shiurwa dinde da diye jidane da migi wangshi di semgi khala war chashi ro chi kongdo ro shi dege inege tanda de semgi di nguho de de shige de zambal digi tsik dige shiurwa tsik dige de khala war chigi 배전을 나오래. 신바지네 야르교로 오지만도 지기 도용오마다 지기 셈 고랑기 제세계기 지금 말하러 왔다 당금인도 나오래. 신바네 야르교로 오지. 딘데로 오시려도. 또
Pena Wanshi is the Wanshi Korang Semrevazana Maris. The Wanshi is Mazola Nawala Migi, the Salaje and Zoo Salaje and Migi. Jingen so da bji or the migi tege sala che gi chen sam ji or ma to 살아 자리 미 거랑 지고 말이스.
Mm.
왕시대도 간가 단다 시비기 현 제대로 그제 살아데 가르잖아. 시비기 제리라 차디어레스.
Shibe chile.
조 통해 지어라.
Mm.
조 통해데 시바 거랑기 디 제리 차디어레스. 셈기.
Samge chile lagu.
셈기
Wangshik.
제리 차디어레스. 왕시대 가르잖아. 살아 진행기 현레스.
Mm.
로바 진행.
Mm.
셈라데 살아 사부 통토야기 라 로바스 지거잖아. 미게 원부터 지거레스.
Wangbo le wangshi.
왕시.
Sheba.
오야.
So first, he's saying when we use eye consciousness in general is not the mind. Eye consciousness is not the mind. And when when you talk about seeing clarity, we have a sort of a notion that it is usually the function of the eye consciousness. But in reality, the clarity part is done by the mind, and the eye consciousness is merely acting as a contributing factor or condition in between. So so the clarity or luminosity is done by the tassim gi chilere la goro selwa da sim kurang chilere mi wangshi gi mares.
다 살아 자디 셈기 디레스 젤리레스.
Mhm.
셈기 젤레르 모두 미시기 디 말에 미시데 셈라 살아 제 진행기 로바 진행기 디레스.
So
겐
eye consciousness is saying is a
미시다 셈니 카가레스.
contributing factor, but the actual clarity, luminosity is the what it is done by the mind. So the mind and the eye consciousness is two separate thing, two entity.
다 코니 양 대화 매바 말에 미시다 셈니 된 대화 요레 이나야 코니 모 카가레스. 미시다 셈니데.
And eye consciousness and the mind obviously is very much connected, but the nature, the aspect, how they function is two separate things.
강아족은 쉐바제도라 지자네고 자위게 에 대시고로 다 쉐바들라 이와 미다다 이와즈나면도 거기 넘버 미다 몽부 다 샘조르 리소르즈 소이리 용거래 다 나진게 다 미시 나시라서 왕부게 쉐바 용거래 이시제도 다 리시다 이시제 존라야 때 벨카가래 샘 가르저거는 샘다 이다 넘버 쉐바 숨 던지라 샘제와다 이제다 아주 남시 이지 남시 제지로
Mm.
대숨데 민 미다 타데레마도 자위기 돈다지레 코니 고도 소무자로 모지레스 던지
Not sure it's helping or not. The Tibetan word we use shepa, usually translated as a knowing, And when we use the word knowing, 단대기 싫어 shepa le 남시라고 해. 다음에 지당.
다시 지당이 쉐바자디 지기 가자디시고 단다디 샘다 이다 넘버 쉐바 숨 던지데 데 쉐바디 이기 넘버 쉐바라 제고레스 샘자다 이제다 넘버 쉐바 남시자 숨 코랑 숨데 민 가가르마도 던다지제 다 쉐발라 다 류시 샘시제다보다 다내진 지 소위기리다보다 당게 다 오는 영역에 샘중들이 간가요라 자동 쉐비나요 렘
So when we use knowing, I don't know, sometimes translated as awareness. It's this is a very general kind of word that covers a lot of things. Under that we have knowing or awareness of the mind, awareness of the body, awareness of the sensory consciousnesses. All the mental factors come under this big umbrella word, and usually when we talk about the mental consciousness, mental knowing, mind, consciousness, awareness, all means the same thing. All means the same thing, refers to the same entity, but different vocabulary or different name, but it all refers to one entity, same meaning. But we use a different word.
Can I
Sure,
add something?
sure.
The fact that consciousness illuminates itself too, not just exterior objects. Help me get past what you were just saying. And thinking about that. So,
Ale sim Quran rang seo den rang ri lama so ke dang sik phe rang ri da ma so rang ri thi de
yang kora
tin min de ne phi na le rang ri sik min de sim Quran ke sim Quran she bala de
di rari ki tsidi mindo
ale inji don't do anything
sem korang shia ga nipa di sem la yo do zia ten rang la ji yong yo de
So, earlier he was talking about the mind has the ability to know mind itself, right? So I was asking, isn't there a word that we talked earlier, self-knower, if you remember that, self-knower, self-cognizer. He was saying the actual word is not in Tibetan, but in English it does, but we have a different word. In this translation, it is translated as a reflexive awareness, if you know. That Tibetan word is the self-knower, self-cognizer. But what he was saying is that no separate kind of consciousness, knower of the mind itself, but the mind has the ability to know the know itself. Yeah.
di la dangi keju jiba ji yoro nywa zum ji da ni du tu ba ko keju ji yore nywa zum ji da ni du tu ba ko sem korang ha ko nyen to ni ji yoro da sem din ji yo ba dis tu ha ko gre za
Similar.
ta korang nyung je gi rari ji yoro
제가 되게 저는 세랑리 배주 당선은 랑리 요래 요 말이다 랑리 레데
tsawe ki chidang rari zayde yore sem gi di sem rewe zana mares
Now we are almost moving into the debate. So he was saying, the experiencer of the mind, right? There is an experiencer of the mind. And so he used the experiencer of the mind as a self-cognizer. And then I asked him, then there's a self-cognizer. But he was saying self-cognizer is not considered as the mind. Like in the, so self-cognizer, as we know earlier, it's a debatable, right? So mind that knows the mind, sim korang sim shingi da rangri mare la ra. Tanda kisha la de.
ta pena nga zun joje zi gora pena di pumbar sabu chacha bayna kon joje suin jo gore ko dindi ji zu dindi ji ib dindi ji yabade sung gang jo gore zana yuljen ji gin ja gore yuljen ji gi ja gore ta yuljen joye ge yuljen de la kari yung gore zana yuljen sum yung gore chi kare zana wangbo ji yung gore ko zu re de ro tene kaza ji yung gore ene sheba ji yung gore 다 대송부 간우지기 조고다. 어 추간 간다 간이 바나 고 코란 조제들라 율젠 조제기 율젠들 율젠 숨 간야로 와지기 조고 그래서. 다 니도 찾아봐이나 죽은 조고 그러잖아. 아주 미시 되자고 그래서. 미기 니 통네 데 셈라 디 코입들이샤 유자들이샤제디 셈라 땡고로. 니도 다 미시기 조고 그래. 조젠기 최진 바이나. 더비나 다 셈서부디 수근 조고래 다 샘기 뭐 살아 임바데 간 조고래 이제 다 코랑 냠수녀 라리지 요르데 라리 되게 딱고 뭐 살아 임바데 라리 되게 조고래
네, 그게 전선 랑리 가랑서 레서네. 심. 랑리 요래서 돼.
뭐라 라리 요즈고 다 라리 어 라리 요즈데 다다 티었다 그때게 요 치고를 받았다
야야야야.
이때 코랑 그때게 양 다와 이 소소리 단다디 지게 남자 치고
야야.
이게 남자 치고 라리 조고
이게 디날 뷰it날 좀 랑리 요나면 스타미야.
다 두대 남자 제바이나 오마 달리 비라리 제고 말아
그래.
달리 비 루스 제바이나 라리 자데 킬링 거 말아
예.
단다디 저 도데 바다 오마 라기 바데 저기 라리 제 빌루 좀 거래 다 고조기 조다 제바나 라리 셈코란 뭐 살아 이 조거잖아 그 라리 기 조거 되지
So, looking at the singing bowl, right? When we look at this singing bowl, that there's a singing bowl in front of you, it should be established by your subjective, Eugene, subjective, let's say subjective entity. And that subjective entity that says that there is a singing bowl, because you were saying, there are three. The first one is sense organ, right? And the second is the person, and then the third is the consciousness. So in this case, you are able to say that this is a singing bowl in front of me is done through your eye consciousness. Your eye sees it, right? And then there's a singing bowl. And just like that, when you talk about the mind, yes, there's a mind. Who does that? And then again, we came to the earlier, the self-cognizer, reflexive mind. So I was asking, are you saying, does that mean self-cognizer exists? And he was saying here, it's, we are talking more about the general, without kind of bringing philosophical, differences, and more kind of a general kind of presentation of there's a mind, experience by a mind. Today about the Suglu Lamb.
uma taliba tabu na jago mara tan do de ta raju ba te do rari do
Oh dear. So from philosophical point of view, middle way consequence school doesn't accept, self-cognizer mind or reflexive mind. But other school, Sutra school, autonomy middle school, they assert that there is mind behind the mind. Any other questions?
So I'm trying to understand the difference between obscuration of the mind and the object of the mind that is illuminated by the mind. So thinking of thoughts, are like certain thoughts obscurations of the mind, whereas other thoughts are objects of the mind?
The color, semgi dibalore, dibachojil dibache, chojila any semgi cell wala shora dipa the cell wala the morangi dik conditional lodus dipa shojne semgi dipa yoche chojil dipa cell wala shora dipa cell wala de zamala any 더 고단 간지로 고고래 라고서래 딩이 직 디시스케는 직 하고 면도
pena ma zo di ro sheldam zang yang ji ro shel gu bomba yo ro shel gu bomba zang yang ji dam yo na le yu ne chu den yo mai na ro dam yo na ni chu den yo mai na ta bomba de gang ga zo ba cha de ro zo ba cha de 거기 나로를 가리 루이메데 살로 통구 말아 지로네 살로 통두고 말아 답그 지로 건가 추샬다 장마 저베나 몸ben 셀담 나로를 가리 루이나 자상 지로네 따나 통두고 와 지난 건가 그 갈로 때 나로를 지 녀바도 매바 장마 통두고 와 다 디바지도나 다 당기 녀바도 어디 bomba 다 셀담 다보지 쪽바 차드나 되게 다 도자당 컨트롤러서 베기 딥데 베기 가자데 시고네 셈라 도자당 컨트롤러서 베두스마 tum데 되면라 그셈 그랑기 레진 모데 가리민 하고 두고 말했어. 근데 셀담 다보디다 조베나 루샤바이나 그 괜히 단디 이겐베데 장마 하고 두고 셰두고 말어. 이 주자게 장마 제샤베나 셀 당살림바데 하고 두고 말어. 어디나 지레스.
So I've first asked a question, and if you have further clarification, then feel free to ask. So he was using an example of, you have say a bottle, a clear bottle that you picked up from very muddy water. So that bottle is, completely kind of muddy, and you won't be able to see what is inside, through the bottle, as well as outside. It's all covered in the mud. And once you washed it, then you will see the external as well as internal, the transparency, the clarity of the bottle. So when we talk about the obscuration of the mind, just like the bottle is covered by, the mud, the mind is covered by the, afflictions such as anger, hatred, attachment, all of those. And when you are able to kind of bring up the pure nature of the mind, which is just like washing the bottle. If your mind is pure, clean, in its natural state, completely free from all those obscurations of, afflictions. So that's what we are saying, when we talk about obscurations, cleansing, or mind kind of luminosity. If that is, I'm not sure if that is the answer, or you can further ask question.
So it's certain aspects of thoughts.
Uh-huh. 알아. 다 쉐베기 자식아 다 명어서 올라오라. 배시나 착보다. So that's right. Yeah, you can say aspect는 되게나 다 생경어 그 묘되게 수고 말어.
생기 ngō mē bā chūgō kumdēs. Tā semgi ngō salwa yinpa ngā chū ngā rānsu tānda ngō yu zin tūgō, sem khurā ngō yu zin tūgō mārī, tī ngō salma salda jādān. Tā kō ngō dī sawa lā tā ngā chū kī tā nyamo dōsum dēki tā pā nyūru tāmba nā, kāli tā kō ngō salwa yinpa tā rāshīngi ngō yungu wā rēs.
The problem here is the word you use, aspect. So, when you say aspect of the mind, I asked him, again, translating into Tibetan, the aspect could be translated as aspect as well as nature, but that is not exactly the same. You are not really kind of working with purifying the nature of the mind, which is already pure and undefiled, but you are purifying obscuration, which is completely different from the mind itself, like attachment, anger. So as you are able to kind of purify, separate those adventitious temporary afflictions, then the nature of the mind will kind of sort of manifest itself, in its kind of undefiled, pure nature.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do, and this has to do with how English is a very imprecise language. So it said that mind has the nature of mere experience, and I'm wondering where the mere assigns. So a couple of ways to parse that. One is mere experience, meaning, for example, mind is the knowing of an object, but it's not the object. That's one way to parse it. Another way to parse it is it is experience and nothing other than experience. And so I said all that so I can ask this question. When we're talking about definition of mind, is it also the agent of action? Not merely knowing, but also acting.
정보도 완대시 인지기 기에 권한 오셔로 디는 디게디 걸어다 세부 매워지 비위는시 딘데 남지한테 저어디 들으셔 셈기 랑시 탄다 용잠실라 잠다셔로 용잠라디 잠라디 다데 권한 고아담을 낸다 도로도 전내지 배자시나 잘라지게 용어르시나 디 용어 다가나만도 지기 잘라코랑기 개디 요마로 잘라코랑 많이 받디 용잠 지어로 잘라디 용어지 잘라디리게 타대버지 시다가 용어를 쉐발라고나 딘데지 샤도스 디 마엠바 양칼로레 용어 코랑기 더 용어 코랑 용어 마엠베 용어 라오레 더 용어를 타대베 용어 라고나 세부 차이는 하나씩 싫어 거든요 딘데 시다가 전다 코랑 디케지 지워데 데르샤 셈기 뭐디 체니라는 뜻이 교도장 볼라 코 인지도는 액션 라그와 칠레 칭해지기 아니 뭐르엘도 내가 칠레 제법 볼라고 칠레기 제법이 개주시오 말을 그래서
다 당아 쪽에 샘세도라
용어잠래 마임바 칠레지요 말을 산다 용잠실라로
다그 젤레 때 소화되도라서 번데야지 그러와 때그 젤레 샘기 젤레 차대요 아주 통해지어라 통해돼서 건가 샘기 젤레 차대요 젤레잖아 리바제도 리바데 살와다 리바니 카갈 당게 집이 진이자 되는 그래서는 살와도 리바즈니 니자 소아
음.
살와데 코랑 ngo라자 리바즈 되는 다 거기 젤리들 봐 개줄려자 잘고 그 젤리를 잘고
Yeah. So you were saying that, again, feel free to ask when you talk about the agent of the action or maybe doer. Earlier we talked about, the mind kind of having a two component. One is clarity, the other one function is awareness. That awareness is kind of action that mind does. And, a simple example, when we talk about seeing something, that seeing is done by the mind. So it is kind of, 자꾸 내가 정해지러 간다. Something.
젤리지 되는 다 거기 칼로 그 개주제로 지라
So action is sort of feature of the mind.
그 자와 같이 거는 다 리비 자와데 리바데 생기 지가 버렸어
So seeing,
Sure.
awareness, knowing is done by the mind. Again, not sure is that the answer or
So, yeah, those seem like different things to me. So if I see something and, well, if there's a knowing of something being seen, that's passive rather than affecting change to something.
제단지 통화를 지난 네 갈라 or다 다들 인지소도 비유들 다다이 말에 이거 즉 통솔하셔로 디 다가라디
다 예전에
첼레도 카가도 그러셔서 그런 게 되게 싫어도 세워 찬지.
소차게 맨날 연락해서 되게다 다 주다버지 바나 잠주기다 레자다버지 가서 라베 뇽거와 라베 도스뇽네 다디 레자데 주부조르지 용거나 다 레야 고란 자위기 주부기 디 지여로다 사도 가리면데 데 라바다데 라바나 코니 레네 라베 등도 옆에 좋아져 용거와 맞을라 주부레야 주부기 좋아데 라베 등도 옆에 조르비 용거라 라베기 이등도 요 말했어 근데 이 주부기 좋아데 수기 등도 용거라 생기 등도 용거라서 용하데 라베 등도 가래잖아 근데기 좋아 렌지기 셰바지 요래서 라베 등도
Yeah. So using another example.
주비 좋아 렌지기 다 셰바지 샘단 대화 요 되게 근데기 라베 등도 옆에 셰바데다 샘인 대화 매바 말에 군인 대화 요래서 된다 군인 대화 요래 주부디가 투바당 그 커넥트 거다 맞아 다다 맞서는 샘라 다티고 디 주부 임바데 다 주부기 좋아지 차차라서도 요러다
Yeah.
딘디기 차차라기 좋아도 용하데 샘기 등도 용거스 용하데 샘기 등도 용거레스 좋아데
Using an example of, when you're touching something by your hand or finger, let's say dirt or rock, and when you touch it, you have a feeling, right, of something smooth or something rough. But that experience, that is your mind, your mind, and your finger or hand is simply acting as an agent, sort of connector to your mind. And the feeling of, what is there is not on the finger, it is in your mind. And obviously there's a connection that kind of you're touching by the hands or fingers, connects that information to your mind, and mind field is not finger by itself.
So then,
The experiencer is the mind, not the finger here.
so then if there's a decision to move the rock, is that mind initiating that choice?
이거레스
야, 다들 구조당 파직 뼈고 내는데 뼈디 칼로 다디 다주 징해라고 징해디 승미 주고라도.
제레 야마 유어디 샘기 거레스 그 당에 베자드라 가르잖아 균인 발랍진도 디 골조 야고다 야고 대대마다 지지 되는 대학교 요 말을라서 아
So that's right. It's by mind, and it does decision or moving, and that's why we talked earlier about mind being like an ocean wave. It just moves everywhere, and because of the power of the wave, whatever things that is on the ocean will carry it away. So likewise, yeah.
그 zubu 차시 가서라 그 유월 그 차시 관계 등도 유월스. 다 zubu 난게 쉐바 용소데 샘단 대화 매바 지가 요머리 샘단 콘 대화 요데레스. 다 자위기 남배기 중에 다 샘들라고 타라기 여양 망부지 제야 요데스.
Yes.
right.
So just like that, the say, primary mind is everywhere in the body, and it is always connected with the particular kind of consciousness of the whatever part of the body is. But again, in Buddhism, we talked about many different levels of the subtlety of the mind. No. Okay.
Yes.
Depends.
야, 되네 다 말해.
So, any questions? No. And here, if not.
가리라베
고베 신감데 펜다데 와마르 종웨네 체레 생와데
인생야소의 샤베 시데 버도데 땡유로지 정지 자발아바웨 제다라 젠바 당콘도 상보데안 데젠데 다 군게 제소 달로지 야완데다 담제랍도 드스모자 가와 담제 쟁모 강라 조도 나바데 나신데베 자완데 근자 상보 제제랍도 모와라이 장조 zem조렘보제 마제 바나무제 조제 개와 냠바 메바라 고네 곤도 베와라쇼 돈이 타베렘보제 마제 바나무제 조제 개와 냠바 메바라 고네 곤도 베와라쇼.
In the land circled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows near a person, shares it, tens and so remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attain omniscience and Samantragata true, so now we dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect Buddha actions. May the spring jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which is arisen not diminish but increase more and more. May the spring jewel veil of emptiness that has not arisen arise and grow,
and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Thank you.